I'm Cara and
I'm Sunshine,
and we're both double majors in education and environmental science from Sitting Bull College on the Standing Rock Reservation in the southern part of North Dakota and then the northern part of South Dakota. And we're here to talk to you guys today about fracking. And fracking is an issue that we on Standing Rock are considering how it will affect us, and it does affect us right now because it happens in the northern part of North Dakota. So our presentation is on whether or not reservations should allow fracking, pros and cons, and through this presentation we hope to convince you that fracking is not a great idea for your reservation.
So we all see in mainstream media coming up, a lot of people are interested in fracking, and some people may not be educated on what it is or how it could affect them personally. And so our main question is, do we want fracking to come to our reservation at Standing Rock?
So what is fracking? Fracking, which the full name is horizontal drilling coupled with multi-stage hydraulic fracturing, is the process of going into the earth, which we'll show you in a sec, which allows us to reach a previously unrecoverable kind of gasoline. So what happens in the process of fracking is basically the drill goes down into the earth and into the shale. And once this drill goes down, it now, as of the start of horizontal fracking, is able to turn horizontal 90 degrees and go into the shale. When it does this, it creates this path for these small seismic tremors, which have their own impacts. And what that does is it allows the gasoline naturally within the shale rock to go into this. And fracking pushes a bunch of this water and other fluids in, and when that gasoline goes into it, it floats all up. And so that's the process of horizontal fracking.
And so how is this fracking different than traditional extraction methods that we use? When we are fracking, we use 2 to 5 million gallons of fresh water per each well, and this is nearly 10 times as much as traditional methods of natural gas extraction. And so the water that we use, the fresh water, is mixed with sand and other various chemicals that we're not sure of what exactly they are due to patents, but they're mixed together and in high pressures injected into the wells. When they make these wells, they put them on pads, and the pads can be up to 5 acres in circumference, and so that loses a lot of the natural habitat in itself just to build it. When they're done with the fracking, there's wastewater that we have to dispose of and take care of it, and that's very salty. It's 6 to 10 times saltier than our ocean water, and so we can't use it anymore. And there are extremely low but still measurable amounts of radioactive materials and potentially neurotoxins that are found. The water just picks up these chemicals. Some of them are applied in the fracking fluid, but some of them are picked up through the Earth's natural habitat. And so these fracking wells go thousands of feet deeper than the traditional wells.
Yeah, to add a little bit to that, basically what we were doing before is we were going a little bit into the earth, or we were going into oil sands and getting that oil that was near the surface. The fracking process, which actually started in the late 1800s, the first guy decided that he could put nitroglycerin into the earth and sort of exploded down there in order for this oil to float up, and it wasn't sort of re-engineered with this process of horizontal drilling until the 1950s, the 1970s in Texas. They really started understanding that fracking was a way that we could get more oil because we were coming to the limits of our surface oil, that we could go deeper in the earth and get more oil. And it is a higher quality oil, which we'll go into in a minute, but it's a lot further down that we have to go to get. We have to go way below the water table, whereas previously we didn't have to go below the water table. But the big problem that we have to consider, or an issue that we have to consider, is that petroleum is a finite resource. And so even when we're talking about using this petroleum, we do have a lot of it right now in the United States, especially in the Bakken region, as you know, if you're from Montana, as we know, being from North Dakota. And this fracking oil, like we're saying, it's just saying it's a higher quality oil because it's a lighter oil, so that they don't have to refine it as much in the refineries. Otherwise, that heavy oil that's near the surface, they have to put it through the refinery process quite a bit more. But an issue with this lighter oil is that it's more volatile. So it has the potential to explode or ignite a lot more easily. And we'll go into some of the issues that we've already seen with that volatility later in the presentation.
So this fracking fluid that we're using to inject into the wells is, like I said, a mixture of water, sand, and various chemicals used in high pressure to create the fissures in our land to help open up these areas where the oil is being held. And we're curious as to what we find in this fluid, what's present. And so through samples that have been collected either at various maybe wastewater stations, people have found a long list of things that may be present due to the fracking fluid. But the companies, they're protected by patents, that they don't really have to share that information with the public. So.
Another thing that we have as an effect of fracking, which you don't hear about a lot, but you do see on a map, which we'll see in a minute, are these flares that come off all the wells. And you must see them when you're driving by and think, they're burning a lot of something, right? And it turns out they are. They're burning like 400 to 600 square cubic pounds of methane gas every day, I think, with these flares. A huge amount of gas that they're burning. And they've tried in Texas now, they're working on sort of getting that gas back into a system so that they can use it as well, because it isn't sort of a big waste. But for now, a lot of it's being burnt. And the result of that is that you see all the cities along the East Coast, but all of a sudden in North Dakota and in northern Montana, we've got this bright spot at night, and that's all these flares. And so it's not, I mean, it's light pollution, yeah, but also think about what that is, because these are like lights, but those all gas going into the atmosphere. And so that's something to think about.
And also with this, these flares, nocturnal animals, they depend on light sources to be their guide at night, and so these flares can be confusing to them, and they use the wrong source to guide them on their path, and so it can be detrimental to our wildlife as well as just the air quality and as being just light pollution itself. So as we can see when we focus in on the Bakken area, they're all kind of along the same path or in similar areas, and these wells are going up right next to each other. Once one's productive, they think that things around it are going to be productive, so those areas are being used a lot more quickly than they would be, and so that's a big issue because the land is changing and they're doing drilling, and that itself is just seismic activity around where all these wells are.
And you don't see it in this, we see it a little bit later, and we'll see some of it. A lot of this is Indian land up here. This is the treaty of 1865, which is, nobody follows it, but it's still our most recent treaty in the code of the territory. But it goes up here and into this region, and then you've got Fort Berthold up here, and you've got some smaller reservations in this area. So it is a lot of it on Indian land.
And even some of it's the national grasslands in the area.
Yep, we'll go into that a little bit.
Other than methane, we also have this contaminated water that comes up, the wastewater, and some of people's potable drinking water is being contaminated through just aquifers and things like that, not being taken care of properly. And so not only do we have this wastewater, but it is affecting people's drinking water too, and that's important. It brings life to all of us. This wastewater, they're required to put it, to dispose of it or take care of it, and if they can't transport it right away, they put it in these back ponds, or I'm not sure if that's the name, but they'll be lined with plastic, and sometimes they won't be lined, and so anything that's underneath it or around it can be affected by whatever the chemicals are in the fracking fluid, and we're still not sure of what they are, but and since there's no covering over the top, that can be affected if there's a heavy rain occurrence, that the runoff can affect the land around it, or animals can get into it potentially too.
And we talk about the natural gas coming up, but this wastewater is a huge side effect of the fracking process. We were saying 4 to 6 million gallons of fresh water. This is, water from the river systems, from local lakes and ponds, is going into this underground. And when it goes underground, a lot of it already, the sand that they put in, they get the sand, for some reason, we don't get a lot of our sand in North Dakota from the United States. We get a lot of it shipped in from China. And it's slightly radioactive already, because anything from deep within the earth, or a lot of things within the earth are radioactive. But when it goes way deep in the earth and then comes back out, the radiation levels are detectable. And so they're supposed to dispose of it a certain way. However, there's so much water coming out that in North Dakota, they haven't had many places to put it. And so they've used regular ponds on people's property. That's the thing in Fort Berthold that's gone on. There's a couple cases against that, because Fort Berthold said, yeah, we agreed to let you use our land, but we didn't necessarily agree to let you put your water back into our ponds and ruin our water supply. And also, if you can just even from this, if it rains once, then water goes over. We have a lot of people at our college, not a lot, but a dozen or so, who went up to work on the wells, because there are not any jobs, not a lot of jobs on the reservation. So went up to work on the wells and then came back and are now trying to pursue their education instead, because they didn't like necessarily what they saw up there, or because they wanted to go back with their family. And they say that there are just lines of these trucks full of water, because they don't know where to
They're
dispose of it.
spilling the contaminated water back into the lakes and rivers?
Yes.
Sometimes, yeah, not all the time, but they're not being regulated.
Yep. And they're not covered areas. So that's an example. This is an example.
They're spraying the wastewater in, but if you can see that corner over there, it's splashing off and outside of there.
This is
the
radioactive, chemically infused water.
Yeah, and it's splashing outside of the designated area. And so it is detrimental if this doesn't get disposed of properly to the land and the ecosystem. And so if they don't have it in these storage areas, they use injection wells and they just put it back in the earth.
That's their other method. They think that when it comes back through the earth, that the earth will filter it in, but they're putting it down, and it's already got such a radioactive level. It's already got all these other chemical additives, 400 to 600 chemical additives per well that's put into the water. So that's all going back down into the earth when they re-inject it.
And so not only are we changing the natural geology of our planet, but we're adding man-made fractures into the land, and that is allowing things to water and the chemicals to flow more easily underneath the surface where we can't see.
So just as we said, these certain lines of trucks bringing the water away as well. The reason that they're able to not disclose what is in the chemicals that they put under the ground, because you think that they would have to disclose what was in these chemicals. Halliburton in Texas, when they first started this fracking process, sued the government and said, look, we spent a lot of money on the research and development of this fluid that we're putting into the ground in order to make this happen, and it's our patent, and we don't want to disclose it. And so they took that to the government, they won. So this is called the Halliburton loophole. It's an exemption that doesn't force them to disclose what they're putting back into, or what they're putting into the earth with this water. So they can put basically any chemical cocktail that they like into the earth, and they don't have to disclose it. So people, the way we've been able to figure out what chemicals are coming out of the earth is from some of the fracking socks, which are the linings that they use at first to put the water down, but also in some of these pond areas on the reservations and off the reservations. But also another potential issue, which is that about 10 years ago with George W. Bush, the oil companies went in front of Congress and said, look, we'd like you to open up the national public lands in order for us to do fracking exploration and fracking and drilling. And so we'll see an image of the state of North Dakota again, and along the western side, there's a national grassland. It's one of the few remaining untouched grasslands in the country, and probably even the world. And now you can find these wells all over it, because it's public land though, so that means that people can go on it and they can go around these wells. They can go right up to them because it's all public land. And so they can actually take samples from the water that they're putting down and see what's going on there. But
and so and the Safe Drinking Water Act applies to everybody, and that, for me personally, I don't understand why corporations would be excluded from protecting our water that everybody shares. And so again, our question is this detrimental to our tribes? Is fracking going to ruin our land or our water, our livelihood at all? and who is responsible for that if it's done.
So one place that they have started fracking, and this is from a New York Times article, this was on the 4 pages, I think, saying, yes, there is beauty here on the Blackfeet Reservation, but there's also oil. And so the idea that they're really looking for oil everywhere. And the response to that, or, I mean, the benefits of that, obviously, is the money. I mean, people want the money. The other benefits are negotiable. It does sort of delay our dependence on foreign oil to an extent. And we still import a lot of foreign oil.
Not only are we still importing oil, but it's allowing for jobs too. And these jobs sometimes, the oil drilling, those have jobs that are going to last, but how long is it going to last until the wells run dry? And so these jobs aren't necessarily sustainable methods of employment either, including like the Keystone Pipeline to haul this shale oil. That's one of the main keys to it, is that it's going to provide a lot of jobs for us, but those jobs again are only temporary, and we still put all the land at risk of that pipe runs through of being depleted, its quality being depleted. So like we said, the benefits of fracking is that we have an economic gain and we do create jobs, and so that's always, it's nice to keep people busy. And when we compare it to coal production, the gas from shale emits half the carbon dioxide as coal. So environmentally, it is reducing some of our emissions or our greenhouse gas effects. And also coal, when we burn that, it emits heavy metals into our air systems, like mercury and things like that, which are neurotoxins and can affect our health. And this, it'll come back down and settle into our soil or water. So the shale gas does have a little bit of less detrimental effects
From that side. However, based on all the other effects of fracking, there has been a lot of pushback against it. Obviously, we showed you that picture of the Blackfeet Reservation, but there's a whole group of Blackfeet women against fracking. And it's become not just a national, but an international issue. We'll show a slide in a bit of a group in Canada. There's been a couple of groups in Canada who have protested against fracking. It has become something that people on reservations are talking about. We went to a meeting at the AIHEC last weekend, Senate Council Fires, of the elders talking about this very issue and sacred water and what it does to our water
and sacred
sources.
land, and how a lot of our historical rock formations, they may not be recognized by the untrained eye, but when elders or Native Americans see that, they can understand that there's history in those rock formations that we have. And actually by Williston, there's many of them that are threatened right now due to drilling. And they've carbon dated some of these formations, and it's areas of rocks that have shapes like horses or things like that that are humblachus circles or hump areas. And so when they look at it, it's in layers, and they can see thousands of years of history in these rock formations that are there, but all of it's being destroyed by the wells.
So this is a pistil, I sort of slaughter the word I'm saying. Tribe in northern here. This tribe is from Alberta, I think. And they were some of the people who come out to protest the fracking, and they've sort of made a big name for themselves in doing that. Also, there's been a Micmac coalition which has come out against fracking. And go to the next slide. It's pretty ridiculous what you're seeing in these images, right? You're just having this small native group of unarmed, mostly unarmed people coming out and protesting, and the immediate kickback from the government, from everybody else to what's going on here is, I mean, what an obscene picture.
They have a drum maybe, and they have snipers holding guns at them with shotguns, and they have nothing to threaten them with. They just want to protect their land and their livelihood. And so this is definitely a powerful picture to see that those men are so threatened by these two women who are probably just trying to pray, really, you know, that they don't have bad intentions other than to try to stand up for what's right. So we found through our research that there's a lot of dangers on fracking. And this is a list of what we've found so far, but we're gonna go a little bit deeper into it.
So this map does not depict the Montana side. Don't think that Montana is out of the water on this one. But these red dots are all the current oil and gas wells in North Dakota, with the white dots being all the abandoned oil and gas wells in North Dakota. This is not the whole state of North Dakota. North Dakota goes down to about here. Sandy Rock is located about here. This is that top part of that national grassland I was talking about. I mean, can you imagine? This is the Fort Berthold Reservation. And so this is mostly the land that Fort Berthold sold right here. And you can see, we have a professor at the college who grew up in Killdeer and used to go hunting in the Killdeer Mountains. And he says now when he goes back, he used to be able to tell his way around by the rock formations and everything else. Now when he goes back, so many of those things have fallen over, because one of the things that we haven't talked a lot about yet is the seismic activity that North Dakota has experienced since the start of fracking. North Dakota used to have 1 or 2 earthquakes per year, minor earthquakes, 2 or 3 on the Richter scale. North Dakota last year had 44 earthquakes. Not big earthquakes, you know, not even probably noticeable earthquakes, but if you have somebody with seismology equipment or whatever, and they're able to tell, because the process of fracking is in itself creating these little tremors, and so when you hit upon an existing fault line, you create sort of bigger seismic activity. But you can see just how much of this is going on in North Dakota right now. When we showed you that map of North Dakota all lit up, you know, all of these active oil and gas wells, for the most part, all have that flare, you know, and so it's just.
And even though we may not feel the seismic activity, it's going on underneath the ground where these oil wells are, and so it's going to affect the pipes and stuff that are going on underneath really before it affects us, and that's how it's going to affect us, is by maybe erupting some, or, you know, causing something near it to, you know, go into wrong.
Yep, and affecting our groundwater.
And so this is a good picture that we have showing that, see, there may be a pre-existing fault line, and it may not be very significant, but just by having those slight vibrations near the pre-existing fault line, you can create and induce seismic activity. And so even though it naturally isn't a significant thing, we are increasing the activity.
So after that drill goes down, it can now turn 90 degrees and goes horizontal. All the water with the chemicals is put down, because obviously water won't do this by itself, so it has these sort of erupting chemicals in it, which creates the hydraulic fractures, which is why they're called that, into the rock. And like I just said, if it's on a pre-existing fault line, that is going to be amplified by however big that fault line is. We don't have any major fault lines in North Dakota, but everywhere has minor fault lines.
What is the
A pre-existing fault line, basically, if you can imagine the ring of like volcanoes called the Ring of Fire around the Pacific and Japan, that's a tectonic plate, and tectonic plates between them have these fault lines basically, which is where they're connected. But every tectonic plate within itself has little fault lines as well. Mountain ranges are created by fault lines when 2 sides of a plate go up against each other. There's 3 different types. They can go up, they can go down, or they can go over. So fault lines are anywhere where there's basically a crack in the rock. Or a crack in the shale bed, because that's what the Bakken area is. It's a giant, massive shale underneath the earth.
Also, one of the biggest dangers is without using the pipeline, we're putting ourselves open to spilling this oil. And there was a major spill in this Kalamazoo River, which is in Michigan, and it's one of the largest oil spills in the history of the Midwest. And still to this day, there's 20% of that oil that was spilled at the bottom of their river system. So that was 4 years ago, and they're still trying to clean that up.
And you hear about pipelines being safe, you know, that only something man-made could affect the stability of a pipeline. But pipelines themselves are man-made, right? So, I mean, there's always an issue, or there's always a potential for error, and that's exactly what happened in 2010. You know, we're going to put this giant Keystone pipeline down through many reservations, and, you know, people are, how safe it is and everything else. People are thinking it's safe and whatever, but this pipeline wasn't safe. I mean, it got all this water. I think the next slide. These black areas beneath the Kalamazoo River, Kalamazoo's in Michigan, northern Michigan, that's all oil, and like Sunshine said, 20% of the oil that's spilled is unretrievable, and they don't think they'll ever be able to retrieve it. So you want your kids going out and swimming in that water now, you know, you want to be downstream getting fish that have just swum through all that oil. Next slide. how it's affected the wildlife in that region. This is from 2010. You know, this isn't a doctor photo. This is how it looks. And it's pretty. I mean, this is our water. We don't have a lot of water left on the earth, right? And we all need water.
Fresh water.
We all need fresh water.
We're getting salty water through this process.
So our water, yes, is 10 times saltier. So an issue, which I talked about a little bit before, which is the volatility of this fracked oil. Because it is that lighter oil, it is that oil that we have to refine less, it's easier for us to use. But the infrastructure of oil is not set up for this more volatile oil. They have restrictions on train cars and on these big trucks that are made in place for this heavier volume oil. And so when this lighter volume oil comes around, it's more volatile. They're not set up for this. And so this, you might remember it from Quebec last year, I think about a year and a half ago actually now, where this train was going through downtown Quebec and blew up and killed 47 people, basically erupted an entire neighborhood. And this train was full of oil from the Balkan region. And so that, and basically that's that volatile oil that has that potential of exploding, and it did explode, and this time it happened to be in the middle of a major city. In North Dakota, in Castleton, which is sort of in the middle of the state, there was a train that hadn't even made it that far away from the oil fields yet, right in the middle of Castleton. And I don't think we have a picture of that, but it derailed and blew up as well. And that fire burned for about 10 days after that.
They don't go out right away, these fires. So one of our points is that by using these fracking systems, we're throwing off the natural balance of our ecosystems. And by doing that, we can cause a reaction what will affect other aspects of our society. And so we have a desire and a demand for these finite resources, but we'll never have enough of them to meet our supply. And so based off of our demand, as these resources deplete, they're going to end up costing us more, either environmentally, financially, or emotionally, with deaths and danger. So our goal is to maintain a sustainable environment. And so through what we've learned is that it's a pattern of using our resources in a way that not only preserves the environment, but it meets the needs of the people today and those people in the future. So we're not taking away from our grandchildren that are coming after us. We need to think of these things and realize that it's going to affect our future indefinitely.
And so that's sort of the point of our presentation. We're not here, actually we're not even here against fracking, but we're here as people who are interested in a sustainable environment, which pushes us way into the future. And in order to have a sustainable environment, we need the water, we need the land. And eventually this gas is going to run out. We have a lot of it right now. But when it does run out, we're going to have to switch to another source. And right now, what we're doing is basically potentially ruining all the land. I mean, you saw that map of how much we've dug up already and gone down way into already. And so we thank you for listening to us.
Your time. If you guys have any questions, I'd love to answer them.
One of the questions that I have is with as you mentioned, you show that the water is in these little ponds. And is there any type of research or any kind of knowledge that you know that, how do they disseminate or whatever? Does it just with the, it's water, that.
How does it get into the environment and everything else?
Yeah, I know how it gets into the environment, but how do you clean those up?
How do you clean up the water? Right now, their best idea, and this is not based, this is based on sort of just theory more than anything else, is these injection wells. And so they ship it to other places. They can either try to purify it, which is a big process, which takes even more water actually in order to do, and doesn't result, you might get 1 gallon from 20 or something like that. But right now, their best idea is that they put it in these holding wells until they're able to ship it out. Because North Dakota, they're scarce on truck drivers right now, right? So everything is limited by the amount of people that you have to do things and everything else. And so they try to ship it out, and then somewhere else, they push it back into the ground below the water table in the hopes that it will naturally filter up and get out. So these holding ponds that you see, they're just around the oil and gas wells so that they can keep pumping regardless of if they haven't figured out what to do with their trash yet.
Question. Okay, I have a friend who lives in North Dakota, and she said that there's something that they're putting in these barrels, chemical holders, or just dumping them and they run out of space to dump them, is that basically
Yeah, that's
the
what
same
she's
thing?
saying, yeah,
That's exactly
exactly.
that, yep. And they recently, like last week, they found this garage, this giant abandoned garage, and it was full of those fracking socks, which is the sort of liner they put on the inside, that has all those, they're radioactive. When they went to get them out, they had to wear those hazmat suits to get them out. They found them all stuffed, but thousands of them stuffed into this abandoned garage.
For
And
years,
some truck
they've been
driver or
doing it.
whatever had just been putting them in there instead of going off, or some oil company had just been putting them in there instead of going off. One of the things North Dakota hasn't quite